you to our speaker for this evening. Her name is Shan Meisner, and Shan joins us from Rutgers Career Services. And welcome, Shan.
Okay, hi. This mic is legit working, yeah? I assume? Okay, so I probably have to stand in front of the mic. I'm mostly visible anyway, so that's good. Okay, so basically, before I get started in my whole spiel about LinkedIn, a bit of background about who I am in the first place. I'm a grad intern at Career Services, and most of what I do is coming, to do workshops on various topics, including LinkedIn, networking, finding a job, things like that. But basically, I think a lot of people don't think of Career Services, especially if you're in a master's program. But there are things that we can offer you, including any kind of like one-on-one counseling, which we can even do remotely. So if anybody is, there's a large enough portion of online students who might be interested in doing like a meeting with a career counselor over Skype, and that is a total possibility. In which case you would email a career counselor and just let them know that you're interested in doing that. But basically the different kind of appointments we have, we can go through your resume for half an hour. That's the standard time for our appointments. Or cover letter, personal statements, well, you're already in grad school, but if you're trying to do a PhD, there's that. Mock interviews, or even just discussing interview strategies, we can do that as well. And different kind of job search related discussions we can have with you as well. One of those things that we might discuss is this thing called Career Shift, which you can actually use to find Rutgers alumni. And that's like a little known tool that we have at Career Services. So there's lots of hidden gems that you can probably find on your own by going to careers.rutgers.edu if you're willing to take the time, or if you just make an appointment. There's tons of resources that are underutilized that we'd love to show you. But that's a whole nother spiel. Anyway, basically, we all know what LinkedIn is. A lot of us have a sort of like LinkedIn presence, but maybe not something we care about. Maybe something just like not even our picture, or just our name and maybe the title, and there's nothing really else on there. So you kind of just prove that you exist as a human being, but you're not actually showcasing anything about yourself, which might be to your detriment. So of course the purpose of LinkedIn, that's actually an interesting thing, because a lot of people are on LinkedIn, but it's almost kind of like, well, I know I'm supposed to be on LinkedIn. That's a thing people do, right? And you don't even know why you're on there. Funnily enough, I know somebody he's retired and he has a LinkedIn profile, and his headline is retired. And I'm thinking, do you even know what LinkedIn is for? Why do you have that at all? But I mean, that's cute, but basically you can be using it to move forward in your career, and that's the whole point of it. So I'll actually explain what that means. What does professional networking actually mean? Obviously, it can aid you in your job search, and there's tons of news and information on LinkedIn that you can be checking out as well. So there's a couple different reasons for being on there. This is just, to explain here that lots of people are on LinkedIn, which you probably already realize. But yeah, you got everyone from a Fortune 500 company, you've got even retired people apparently, but basically lots of people are on here, and it's a global phenomenon. It isn't just, the US type of thing. It is kind of like, it is the Facebook of, the professional world, professional Facebook, I guess. So that should not be neglected. So more reasons why you should basically have a LinkedIn profile. It is something that is accessible 24/7. It is your resume that never sleeps. Yeah, and that's advantageous for you. The other thing too is that it's something you can use even as an introvert, and I'm an introvert, so that's actually why I enjoy it. You can network in a way. I mean, you still want to network in person, with people, real human beings, but nowadays, actually, we're transitioning to being more kind of leery about personal contact. I think the tendency now is you would rather send a text message to somebody than leave a voicemail. It's almost nerve-wracking to speak on the phone with somebody, and I think we're just more comfortable clicking our way to get to know people, which is super interesting. And we could have a whole discussion about why that might be good or bad, but the truth of it is that is helpful in terms of networking now doesn't mean you have to cold call somebody. It means that it's as simple as like basically sending a friend request, like, hey, you seem interesting, you're doing a cool job, and you can message a person, and it's not a huge deal. So basically what LinkedIn is doing is it's creating warm contacts to make networking easier as opposed to cold contacts. So literally somebody you've never met before, you don't know who they know, there's no connections whatsoever. And that you can message somebody with whom you have absolutely no connections, but the more people you add on LinkedIn, the greater your network is, and you can see, okay, maybe you don't know this person exactly, but you know somebody who knows this person, and you can start to forge connections that way, and it doesn't seem as completely random. You're trying to get to know them because it's obvious that you have somebody in common, that you're part of the same network. You can see if somebody went to the same school as you, and that makes things less weird because you can be like, hey, you know, I went there. All sorts of things that you can find in common with somebody that makes it, yeah, way less weird to try to get to know them and, you know, network. This is going to tie into, I think, really the discussion to come later, but basically, LinkedIn can be part of your own brand. Not to use, you know, that word gets thrown around a lot, but basically, your brand, I mean, when you put out a resume, you're probably not thinking about branding, and it's not really about that. It's just, hey, I'm applying to this job, this is what I can do. But when you put it on LinkedIn, it becomes more than just your resume, more than just a list of things that you've done. There's actually an opportunity there to kind of create a narrative about yourself, and I'm going to get into that much more deeply later. And I guess basically another point is that just thinking in terms of the employer perspective, how would you feel if you're, let's say, looking through a stack of resumes and you, I mean, the very natural thing to do is to look up some of these people online to see what's, you know, what's out there about them. And generally speaking, that's going to be, I mean, you anticipate finding something on LinkedIn, if anything. And how would you feel if you find one candidate, and let's say they could have on their resume, you know, very similar things, similar experiences, education. One person has a strong online presence and the other person is kind of completely off the grid and you don't really know what's happening with them. I think we find it way more easier to connect with and just, you know, want to get to know people who have already put themselves out there and you feel like, oh, I'm very confident of who this person is. Not just from reading, let's say, this resume that they sent to me, but also checking out their online presence. They're connected to the world. That means a number of different things. If you're on LinkedIn, you can be, you should be active on LinkedIn, that's the thing. So part of different associations and groups on there, obviously you should have a number of contacts, because if you're on LinkedIn and you have maybe like 2 friends on there, that's a little sad looking. The thing is, you all are studying something which has the word information in it. So, you know, like computer, I guess you are utilizing things like computers, technology, data, things like that, and it almost strikes somebody as strange if you don't have that kind of online presence to some degree. It says maybe, you know, they don't like getting to know people, or they don't know lots of people, or they don't actually enjoy using technology, which is probably not good. Or they're paranoid about finding people online and they just don't want to be found. So it might send the wrong message if you're not present online at all. I mean, especially, I think if you're like a career changer and you're older, they might also attribute that to age, wrongfully so. But they'll say, oh, you know, they're not with it, they don't like using computers. So don't let people assume, you know, get to assume that about you. And the other thing too is that there's this misconception that LinkedIn is really just business oriented. And I mean, if you are trying to work in the business field, it makes much more sense to be on LinkedIn, but everyone is using LinkedIn. I actually, recently, I met with a student and he told me, oh, before I came here, you know, I looked at your LinkedIn and I wanted to see everything you did. And I'm like, all right, well, most people don't admit that to other people, but the truth of the matter is, we're creeping on people on LinkedIn all the time. How many of you have ever, just like in Googling somebody, found their LinkedIn and looked at everything they've done, everything they have on there. I feel like I'm not the only creep out there. I think a lot of us want to know who we're speaking with. And it's almost really disappointing if you can't find anything about somebody. You're like, oh, it could be anyone. So yeah, I think there is this tendency towards wanting to put ourselves out there. So basically what you should do is obviously have a LinkedIn profile and have, what they call that professional online presence. We also recommend a minimum of 25 contacts. I would even go so far as 50, just so, and it's not that hard to garner that many people. Classmates, already, if you just add everybody who's in a single class of yours, you can already get a ton of people. Professors, it's really quite easy to build your professional network. And then you could even search, like I said, other contacts that you don't have to technically know somebody. You can just, honestly, you can look up just I mean, if you want to look up librarians in the area, and you could do that, and it wouldn't be completely weird to add them to your network, because it's obvious if you did this right. Your profile, it'll be obvious what you're trying to do. It'll show that you're currently a student, all your professional experiences, so they'll see you have something in common, and they won't think, oh, who's this weirdo trying to add me for absolutely no reason. And obviously when you add somebody, you want to keep it personal, especially if you haven't technically met this person before. Yes, so as far as building that professional online presence, obviously this picture is an example of not the route you want to go in. So what is the basic, setting up your LinkedIn profile? You've got to write an informative profile headline. Obviously you can keep it simple. It could just be your job title. Granted, if you are not currently in some kind of job, you can say that you're a student, and then the other nice thing that you probably should do is, add a comma, currently seeking a job in blank. And that just makes it abundantly clear who it is you are and what you're trying to do. Some people you can get creative with this headline. It doesn't have to be as boring as, I'm a career counselor here. You can actually use adjectives if you would like. I'll discuss that maybe a bit later. The other thing too is you want to create a custom URL. When you make a profile, it's just going to give you, your profile is going to be like random numbers, numbers and letters. And you can change that to make it more obvious. So mine is Shan Meisner. So I forget what exactly it is, but twitter.com/something, I forget, but Shan Meisner. So, and the reason you want to do this is, well, hopefully, I mean, if somebody has your name already, then that becomes tricky. But that's, again, part of the branding thing. And the other thing you probably want to do is on your resumes, add your LinkedIn profile to your resume. The reason you want to do this is, first of all, they probably are going to look for your LinkedIn profile to begin with. So you already know they're going to do it, so why not make it easier for them? But the other thing, too, I lost my train of thought here. Oh yeah, it's because you can't fit everything that you want to on your resume sometimes. You might be limited to a one-page, sometimes even 2 pages don't give the fullest picture of everything that's going on. So there's other things you can put on your LinkedIn that you can't put on a resume. So, why not say, hey, if you want to creep on me further, you totally can. This is everything out there about me. And a thing I'm going to really get into later is your professional summary. Oh, I skipped one. Also, obviously, we're doing photos today, so you want a good picture, unless you're completely uncomfortable with the idea of having your picture out there, but I think it's a really good idea. It really humanizes you and makes people want to know you better, I think. And then you're going to list off your education and skills in the same way that you would do on a resume, or perhaps slightly differently. You can frame it slightly differently because it's not a resume. I'll get into that. And lots of other things you can list. You can go nuts listing volunteer experience, all kinds of things that you might want to include as well. Granted, you can put tons of stuff on your LinkedIn profile. Doesn't mean you have to. Obviously, maybe some things, going back 20 years ago that aren't totally relevant. You don't have to throw on there, but yeah, still try to be selective. And then once you've done all that, you basically have something that looks a little bit like this. So you can see the title is right there at the top under your name. Lots of other things. You've got your general vicinity, so greater Philadelphia or New York area, whatever it may be. Your industry is there, and you also have some work experience, previous work experiences at the top, and education is also, they put that right there at the top. I don't think that's negotiable. It really, LinkedIn cares about your education. And then you also got your picture, hopefully. The thing too that I want to add is that there's been research that shows that employers who are looking at LinkedIn profiles, honestly, if they're going to read anything on your profile or look at anything, it is going to be your name, your title, and this summary here. I mean, like in real life, reading a resume, they always say it's around 6 seconds that somebody looks at your resume, which is not much time at all. Where they look basically at, you know, the left-hand column and they just scan it quickly. And how that works with LinkedIn is they're basically doing a similar type of thing where just the stuff at the top, hopefully it hooks them and they want to look at some other things, but yeah, they might only look at your summary, and that's why it's so important to include one. This person also did something which I recommend, just again going with like the branding thing and just being open about who you are online. She's thrown down her Twitter account, and that's the other thing too, like your Twitter, you can have people, you can direct them to your Twitter account, even if it's not all professional stuff. If it's sometimes professional, then that's good enough. Obviously, you don't have to share that, but I think it's cool if you do. That's another way for people to just feel like you're easily accessible and they can connect with you on a number of different levels. And of course, so you want to list your experiences. This person did it in a kind of paragraph format. You can do it that way, or a lot of times with your actual resume, you're going to do bullet points. I think the paragraph format has some advantages, one of which is it seems more like storytelling and more natural. I guess it feels less formal. That's how I feel about LinkedIn in general. It doesn't have to feel as stuffy and formal as a resume. But basically the tips I have for this section where you're listing, you know, your experiences, what you did there, would go for, you know, the same for resume critique. Basically, you want to be able to list not just the responsibilities you had, you know, I did X, Y, and Z, but you also want to list achievements. That's kind of the main thing. What did you do in this role that had an impact? And the way you can demonstrate that sometimes is through numbers. Anytime you can quantify anything, people love that for whatever reason. You can just talk about, like, you did something and it had this result. So let's say if you created a workshop, what was the result of that? How were people affected by it? And the other thing too is that, and you can't do this necessarily, yeah, you can't do this with a resume, but you can have recommendations basically tied to these job experiences that you have posted online. So, and there's a bunch of other stuff that you can throw on here. You can list your courses, actually. That's something that oftentimes like recent graduates will put on their resume as a filler type of thing. And yeah, it isn't something vital, but it is something you can definitely do because you have the space for it on LinkedIn. You can get into that, especially master's level work is much more compelling than some of the undergrad work you might have done, which is not very relevant to the things you want to do now. So I recommend doing that. Obviously, if you know any languages, those should go on there. Projects can go on here. You can even add, you know, concrete examples of projects you've done. So if you helped with an event or something and you have the flyer for that, you can add it on there. It's just more interesting and eye-catching that way. People are just really drawn into the multimedia approach. Volunteer experience definitely should go on here, and any sort of honors and awards. Yes, so, and you see at the bottom, you can add documents, photos, all kinds of things. The other thing too is skills. So that's something you normally put on your resume and you just kind of rattle some things off and list it. The neat thing about LinkedIn is you can list these skills and people can actually vouch for you having those skills, and you can vouch for them. And that becomes a little bit more impactful that way. The way you might want to come up with these skills, obviously, I would try to veer away from the more obvious ones, like the skills that everybody has now. Like we all know how to use Microsoft Office, basically. So maybe don't go that route. But another way you can kind of come up with what skills should be on this list is if you're looking, let's say, at the kind of jobs you want, you should be looking at the job description and see what kind of words come up again and again when you're reading these job descriptions. What are the key things that they're looking for you to have? And it becomes obvious that you should try to emphasize that you have those exact skills. So if, if they're in all these job descriptions mentioning that you should be highly organized, then that's something obviously you want to kind of show that you have on LinkedIn and your resume, or also a cover letter. As I mentioned, you can get recommendations, and that's a really nice thing to do. Obviously, it could be a little nerve-wracking just going up to somebody, a coworker, saying, hey, can you just write a nice little thing about me on LinkedIn? I mean, yeah, it's cheesy, but I think it's a really cool thing to add on there. And the way, that you can kind of do that is to say, well, I'll also write a recommendation for you, so that, you both get something out of it. And you can get these not just from somebody who has supervised you, but anybody you've worked with, or even peers who've worked on a group project with you. That's totally a possibility as well. The relationship will be listed on LinkedIn, so it'll be obvious that, if somebody's like your tennis instructor and they write a recommendation, they'll know. So don't get too crazy. And this is basically what it would look like. And it is a nice, effective thing. So this first example, Lindsay exhibited great leadership skills for the fundraising committee. She delegated tasks well and sought to give us hands-on experience. So yeah, it's just really nice. I would go for it. That's my opinion. So I mentioned already what it means basically to have these warm contacts. These aren't. I guess I shouldn't open that. I don't know. So yeah, if you're stuck like, oh, I don't even know anybody, who I add on LinkedIn, it's not that hard. Friends, family, advisors, professors, anybody who you've met in real life or even had, an online class with, you can do that as well. And you'd be surprised once you start doing that, you come up with a really respectable number once you've kind of gone through everybody in that way. The other thing you can do, of course, is if you're comfortable with it, you can say this is your email address, and then it'll go through your contacts on there and see who's already on LinkedIn. So you can do it that way as well. And basically, this is an image to kind of show you how the LinkedIn connections work. They go up to 3 degrees of separation, basically. So you've got your first degree contacts who you're just friends with. Second degree, friends of your friends, and third degree, you get it, friends of friends of friends, whatever I said. Yes, so that's useful. You can see if you are connected in any sort of way. You'd be surprised. You can just look up randomly some executives in California, and you wouldn't expect that you would have any person in contact, in common with them, but you might actually have. So it's really interesting. And this is basically how you would send a sort of invitation. There's a kind of default message that you can go with, I would like to add you to my network on LinkedIn, or something like that, which is perfectly fine. If you're confident that this person knows who you are and won't be weirded out, then you can go with that. But otherwise, you can write a personal note, and that's especially cool if, again, you're just adding somebody on LinkedIn who you think you just want to get to know because professionally it makes sense. Maybe they live in your area and they're doing something that you want to do, and then you can write that in your personal note. Hey, I'm also trying to work in this area. I would just love to add you on LinkedIn. Obviously, you can also find jobs on here as well. There's probably obviously better routes for you to sort of find the jobs you're looking for, but they might still have some things on LinkedIn as well. Companies you can follow, it doesn't have to be companies either. You can follow, obviously, universities kind of have their own LinkedIn pages as well. So I follow Rutgers, and libraries even have their own pages that you can follow as well. And this is useful just, especially after you graduate, when you're not as connected to things anymore. Like nobody's going to be harassing you anymore with like articles about what's happening in the library world. Like that's not, it might happen. But if you feel like you're deprived of that sort of thing, you can use LinkedIn as a way to stay in tune with all of these things. Not just by following certain libraries certain libraries, but you can also follow organizations as well. So the American Library Association. And that's useful because there's lots of discussions that people are having about your field on there, and that's the way you can stay connected, by having those discussions and also just being present. So if they see that you're somebody who's actively involved in these discussions, that reflects very well on you. And that's also another way to make new contacts, because if you notice somebody's like posting a lot, you can just add them and see like, oh, I really enjoy the things you have to say on the discussion group here, can I add you? Things like that. So just kind of proving that you're active in this environment, I think, is beneficial. Yes, so like I said, you can follow companies or any kind of groups. Mention all that. Let's go through there. Oh, yeah, that's actually, they have this thing called Pulse. You can follow certain like famous people, sometimes have their own pages that you can follow. And there's also channels, I believe. So different content will be delivered to you based on like if you are interested in that particular channel. So I think one group was just like women in the workplace or something like that. So you get articles specific to that channel, which, yeah, could just be another way for you to receive news that interests you. And so your homepage will basically look like, kind of like this. So you might see things articles recommended to you by any channels you're following. Milestones show up on LinkedIn as well, and that's like, it's nice if you comment on those sometimes. Like you'll see, oh, somebody got a new job, or it'll be like, it'll post like, oh, it's your 2-year job anniversary. I know that's kind of cheesy, but yeah, you can congratulate people on that, and also you just stay knowledgeable about what other people are doing. I mean, that's the other thing too. You want to join LinkedIn because, yeah, right now maybe all the people you know are also students, and they're not going to help you find a job right now. But 5 years down the line, you know, they might be working someplace cool, and if you're still in touch with them, it's good that you're still in touch with them, like that you can find them easily on LinkedIn. And yeah, and that's how you're staying in this network. So if somebody you know now gets a job, it's really cool, and knows of another job that they're hiring for, it's good that you've kept that connection there. So basically rules for kind of following LinkedIn, obviously you want to, it's all visible, so you want to be courteous to everyone on these discussions. The other thing too is obviously you get what you give type of thing. So if you are able to endorse and recommend others, they're more willing to do that for you. You can obviously be posting content you find interesting, and people will appreciate if you do that. And the key thing here really is to not make a LinkedIn profile and then forget about it and never use it again. That could actually, I feel like, yeah, that could probably harm you a little bit. Let's say you haven't updated your job and you've had a different job for 5 years, and it probably really doesn't look good if your profile still says you're at this past job and doing this thing. It sends kind of mixed messages about what's going on with you. Okay, so all that basically kind of boils down as well to what's on your summary, because that's the main thing people are looking at. And that's a thing that people often forget to do, or they just don't feel like doing, or they don't think it's important. The reality is it's actually, yeah, super important. Kind of like the most fun part of your LinkedIn profile, really. Because it's the most likely to be read, and also it's the opportunity to actually show who you are, tell your story, some kind of narrative. You don't have to use the third person to talk about yourself. You can if you want to, but it's a lot nicer, I think, if you say, you know, I do this, and this is what I've done with my life. So it's kind of, I think of it as the cover letter of your profile. So obviously you can apply to jobs with just a resume and no cover letter, and sometimes that does the job, but the cover letter really sells you. So I actually kind of stole a little bit a colleague's LinkedIn profile, his summary, because I thought it was really good, a good example of somebody utilizing this space as much as possible. So for starters, he already used a more interesting kind of, what is the word, headline for himself. So instead of just saying career counselor at Rutgers University, he put millennial career mental and physical wellness counselor. So that's a cool thing you could do. You don't have to pigeonhole yourself if you don't want to. So maybe you're doing this one thing, but you want to reach out, you know, you branch out and do other things, you get to do that here. So what he did was he listed interests and experience. Then areas of expertise, I actually see this quite commonly. For those who do make a summary, they like listing their areas of expertise. This is particularly good, I think, because he numbers them and it feels like, bang, here are the things I can do. And you can, yeah, so there's lots of different specialties that you can have in your field. Lots of different interests you might have. So you get to talk about that a little bit. And at the end, this is what I like the most, and maybe it is cheesy, but why not? He kind of makes it personal, and especially, so he's a counselor, so he makes it very counselor-y. So saying, you know, he includes a quote at the end, and he just makes it very personal, like he's speaking to you, which I think is really cool. And he also included a picture, and it relates to his kind of message, like I'm helping you out, like I'm a counselor, life doesn't always go the way you want it to sometimes, so it's a fun graphic, and it's, yeah, I think if you can think of something that would make sense for you and your field, then why not? Another example I have on here is, this is a person, you know, important person who works for LinkedIn. So I figure why not go to the people who actually kind of are in charge of LinkedIn, because they're probably doing the LinkedIn thing as best as possible. So the summary is 2 paragraphs, and I'm thinking, you know, probably 3 paragraphs max is what you want to go with. And this is more like a storytelling kind of summary. And I think that actually can be really effective, especially, let's say you've changed careers and you didn't always want to work in this field. You did something completely different. You get to explain why on earth you did that, why on earth you made a change in your life. One of the iterations of my LinkedIn summary, I change it a lot, and actually probably not very good right now, but one version I had explained how I graduated, you know, I studied this, and then I taught English in Germany for a year, and then I substitute taught, and while I loved working with students, I realized I didn't want to be a teacher. And then I figured out I could work at a college and work with students in a capacity where I wasn't teaching them, but affecting them personally. And that explains, okay, well, now this makes sense. Now her resume kind of pulls itself together in a way that's really coherent. And you get to do that with whatever zany path your life has taken. You get to make a kind of story out of it. And instead of waiting for people to kind of fill in the blanks, like, okay, well, I don't know, she was an accountant for 10 years and now she's doing this, so I don't understand anything that's happening. So yeah, and yeah, so that's why I think it's really cool. This individual also did some other cool things in terms of, yeah, just listing specialties and also making it multimedia. So yeah, she's got kind of pictures on here that you can check out, and just makes it, you know, more exciting. I guess it's pizzazz, if you will. Yeah. So basically, in short, you want to be asking yourself, who do you want your audience to be? If you're seeking a job, think in terms of what you would want employers to see and for them to think about you. I definitely think if there are any quotes that you feel like you really love and encapsulate who you are and maybe even relate to what you like to do, you can throw those on there as well. I mean, probably a lot of you are book lovers, so You probably have like a plethora of quotes that you feel would make sense. And you can even find those quotes in a sort of picture form that makes it even nicer, I think. And as I mentioned before, it can be a sort of walkthrough of your resume, how you got to where you are today. You can approach it by listing important accomplishments, your superpowers, if you will, what you're able to do, and then infuse, values, passions, and maybe even hobbies. Like, why not? You can put that you love cats on there. That's totally, it's okay. I think it makes you more endearing, honestly, if you do that. And you're kind of taking a very holistic approach to explaining who on earth you are. So basically, once you do all that, I think you're just, I don't know. I feel like people will want to get to know you and network with you, add you to their network, and maybe even offer you a job based on the fact that you're willing to put yourself out there and it's clear who you are, and and you have fun with technology. That's the other thing too. So basically, that was my long spiel, but does anybody have any sort of questions whatsoever pertaining to LinkedIn? Yes.
Should you be discriminatory on your contacts? I often get people saying, please accept this invite from so-and-so,
Right.
and they're like a casual friend that I wouldn't necessarily want a company to know I'm friends with.
Sure. Yeah, you can definitely be discriminatory. You can decide for yourself, hey, I only want to be contacted with people in my field, because that's what makes sense. And that could probably even be more impactful if you do that. And therefore also the content that you put out, like if you're posting, like articles that you find interesting, that people are actually going to be interested in reading those articles because they're in your field, as opposed to just some random person who works in like marketing. Yes?
I'm just wondering about social network theory as it relates to Liz's question. And so the more diverse your network is, isn't it more likely that the more variety you'll get in terms of opportunities?
Yeah, that's the thing too. So my approach is not to discriminate necessarily just based on like, oh, that's not my industry, because you never know. So maybe this person, they're a random like marketing person, but their spouse works in the field that you want to work in. Like, I think there is a benefit to that as well.
More than one side to this, but it's
Yes.
just, I want you to think outside the box in terms of this and the possibilities for connections.
For sure, yeah. That's a really good point. Yeah.
I just wanted to contribute this anecdote. I worked as a photographer for a long time. Instead of using LinkedIn, it's like real important to have an online portfolio. And I was constantly working on that, and I don't think I ever got a job from it. Every job I got was speaking to people who who knew someone else that I'd worked for. But doing all that work on that website really made me reflect a lot upon my work experience and what I was good at and what I could offer. So I was like ready to talk about that all the time. It's like even if somebody doesn't get to you through your LinkedIn, just like building it is like a whole meditation on your career, which makes it easier to talk about in real life.
Oh, for sure, yeah. That's a good point. If you're making sure to constantly update your LinkedIn, you're constantly thinking about how your work is changing and all the different projects you're doing and what's new. So you're right, it is beneficial, if only for that. I know LinkedIn itself tries to sell itself as like, oh, if you just put your resume out there online, like HR people are gonna contact you and like job offers will, like I don't think it works like that. Maybe for some people, but I think it is more about what you said, and also just like people who already know you wanting to find out more about you. Maybe they met you in person, but they want to see more of your work, more of what you've done. So it kind of strengthens, I guess you would say, the context that you already have. Anything else? Yeah.
When you're thinking about using an email for LinkedIn, is there one email that you should consider one stronger than another? I have 10 personally, if not more. One mostly for business, one mostly for grad school, 2 or 3 that are social, and one that's throwaway.
Oh man, yeah, I have lots of emails as well. That's a good question, one I'm trying to sort out myself. Do you have a comment on that?
I do. I'm wondering having changed jobs a few times in my life, I've regretted using the job-associated email with all my social media platforms because it made it very, very hard when I left a job to continue that platform with, it was challenging, in Twitter especially, to change your email address. So my personal take on this would be to use an email address that's not associated with your company or your school.
And you can also have 10 in there and change which one is your primary. I've got 10 in there. And I just rotate it based on, what I'm doing most currently.
Yeah. So we have a bunch of questions. Alice?
So I'm a part-time library assistant. Do you think I should leave rather in my title being a student or as a part-time assistant?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So if she's got this part-time work as a library assistant, but she's also a student, obviously. So yes, which is the more important thing? Honestly, they're both important. I think they're both important, and I would keep both in your headline. Which should come first? I'm not entirely sure. Whichever you feel like is strongest. But I think they're both very vital parts of your identity right now, and I think it wouldn't be fair to either one to leave it out, type of thing. Yeah, so that's the way I would go.
Was there another question?
We're good.
What I love about this is that, we talk about our digital footprints, and I love that you get to control your digital footprint. So you've got all sorts of things out there that you're balancing. Your Facebook life, your whatever other networks you're participating in. But by creating this, by putting this on your email SIG, you're leading people to the stuff that you want them to discover. You don't want to just have them go to Google and discover anything random. You want to push up to the top of a result list the stuff you want to be discovered about yourself. And so probably there's ways to push that up a little higher, but I love that you're in control. This is all about what Naomi's going to be talking about in terms of your brand. This is also a good opportunity. We have how many minutes, Connie, before Naomi?
We have 12.
Right, so if you have a summary and you want us to kind of think about it, we could actually maybe do a little makeover. So is there anybody who's been concerned about it and wants to work on that first line with the experts that we have here tonight?
It does mean we're going to bring up your LinkedIn
No,
profile.
we wouldn't, yeah. But as what I just said earlier was, how many of you really have all the stuff you want in your email SIG? Right, because that, for many people, that's the primary contact with you, right? And so they're gonna be led to the stuff you want them to find based on that. So that's another thing to control. But everybody's really shy. What would be, like, if we were to work on a student profile, somebody who's just getting out of library school and looking for any job, is there, in addition to saying the word student, is there any way we can frame that? So, adjectives that we could throw in with there. I'm not really sure, I'm not the expert here, but I'm just thinking about what would be relevant to our students here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, most of the students, when I went, I was in the online program here, so they were mostly working professionals in some capacity while being students as well.
How about aspiring information professional?
I like that. What do you guys think about that?
Can you repeat that?
The suggestion was, tell me your name again, I'm sorry.
Maria.
Maria suggests aspiring information professional.
A lot of people that I've been in the program with, I went in real life. Sorry. But,
On campus.
yes, I went on campus. I didn't mean it that way. But, everyone had like another job they were coming from, and a lot of them went back to library work. Like, if you're an architect, they left working as an architect, and now they're an architectural librarian. And like, I guess adding that, if you have an accounting degree and now you're a librarian, like that undergraduate degree still counts for a lot, right?
That intersection is going to be more important to you in your job hunt even if you're trying to break away from it, it might be a transitional thing. So you want to think, and I have a slide in my presentation of somebody I spoke with at ALA, who's a federal librarian, who does get recruiters recruiting her all the time from LinkedIn. And there was one trick, and it was in that headline, separated out 6 different key things and phrases that she does really well. Her skills, her skill sets, you know, if she's been a library director, you know, those kinds of things that recruiters will be looking for. So less esoteric and more specific, less pretty and more clear. You know, if somebody's going to go and they're not a library professional looking for librarians, what words are they going to be using? So
we're also, like, your alumni associations are probably important to you, right? So what about groups within LinkedIn? Shan, do you have any feelings about groups and those associations? We want to be able to discover you. So when I get a notice looking for a job with somebody with particular skill set, and I know we've got an MLIS or MI grad, I want to be able to find you on LinkedIn. So I want to be able to sort and see instantly who I can choose from among the grads. So how should they tag their profiles to allow us to find them more easily?
Sure. I mean, if you're in a group, it'll show that on your LinkedIn profile. I feel like there's no choice in the matter. I mean, I guess you could be a part of a group and hide it, but I think it automatically, shows that you are involved. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I think you don't have to worry about it.
It would be more than just entering the school you attended. It would actually be join the alumni group, yeah?
yes.
Yeah, so you'd have to actually search those out. I'm still new at this myself.
Right.
What other questions? What are you thinking about? Liz and then Maria.
Where would you, if you only had to choose one platform or place to build your main digital profile, would it be LinkedIn, or would it be Twitter, or would it be something else?
I want the flexibility of putting my CV up somewhere, and I also want the flexibility of having a beautiful space. So my LinkedIn profile goes to my About Me space, where I can put a link to the Flickr images I want people to use when I do speeches. I want to be able to have my CV be able to pop as a digital book, and so I can do that in About Me. So About Me is everything intersects. So if they find me on About Me, they can go to my LinkedIn profile. If they discover me on whatever the reverse of what I just said was, and all of those things are linked into my signature, my email sig. So, but it depends upon what type of work you do. If you're a photographer like David, you're probably going to have a portfolio up there somewhere, and LinkedIn that may be the space where your work lives. So you may need more than one place. And what is the combination? That's a palette for you. You're smashing a bunch of apps there.
Okay, I think that's going to be it for our LinkedIn 101. I'd like to give Shan a